Collecting Pokemon is an incredibly enjoyable hobby. However, one thing a lot of people don't speak about is how many mistakes people make when they start that costs a lot of money. Now, you may be thinking, mistakes in buying Pokemon collectibles? They're just cardboard and fun. You're just collecting Pokemon and collecting what you love. How can you possibly make mistakes? And while I agree that it's super true that collectibles are just super enjoyable, the other truth is that there's a lot of a learning curve that happens when you start collecting Pokemon cards, and you want to ensure you get the best value for your money. And as I continue in this video, I'm going to cover some of the biggest mistakes I made, which I learned from as well. Now, I know what you may be thinking. You might be thinking, why should I listen to you about these Pokemon mistakes? And the reason why you can trust me is, well, because everything that I'm talking about in this video is actually mistakes I've made myself and learned from them. So think of this video as a bit of a speed run of knowledge, and here's hoping you don't need to make the same mistakes, right? So number one on this list is not researching recently sold prices before purchasing a Pokemon card. So this one's pretty common when starting out, and I feel we've all kind of fallen for this, right? One thing about Pokemon card prices, right, is it's sometimes challenging to find the exact price for, that card that's raw versus whether it's a PSA 10 or a PSA 9 copy or the BGS copy or the BGS Black Label and all of that. Because pricing for Pokemon cards varies a lot depending if the cards are graded, depending on the quality of the card, depending who they're graded with, and so on. Like, it's actually very common that a newcomer would purchase a PSA 9 over a raw copy of a card. But sometimes raw copies, if they're in good quality, can be more desired than PSA 9 versions, especially for modern Pokemon cards. And researching is one of the best things you can do when you're involving yourself in the Pokemon hobby. So just as a very basic pro tip, right? When you're on eBay, you can actually click in the advanced section when searching for a card, and you can see the sold listings prices. This will give you what the Pokemon card actually sold for, not what they're listed for on eBay. Though you need to remember, right, depending on the card, sometimes eBay listings are higher than what you would pay for something like at a card show, right? Though if you are at a card show or you want to get some data on PSA 10 slabs, you can actually use Misprint, which is the paid partner of today's video. So Misprint is a US-based website that allows you to buy and sell Pokemon cards at community-driven prices. However, if you do download the Misprint app, they do have a cool scanner tool which allows you to fit as many PSA slabs as you can in the photo, and Misprint will automatically detect these and give you market prices for them. This becomes a great tool if you are purchasing at card shows, or if you're just at card shops and you want to easily understand the value of some PSA slabs. Now, also Misprint has a very cool buy now and sell feature. So buyers can put offers on certain Pokemon products and cards, and if they ever fall down to that specific price, the purchase is made instantly. Honestly, Misprint is really growing lately, and it's a community-driven platform for Pokemon cards. Now, if you do want to try it out, you can use my code to get $5 off your first purchase. Feel free to learn more about Misprint. You can find all the details within the video's description. But as I was saying, right, it's not just for eBay listings as well. There's a lot of apps and tools you can use to actually gather market prices. That's why when you're buying a lot of cards, don't just fall for whatever you see on eBay, right? Sometimes the eBay buy it now prices are usually a little bit over the market value because people put a little bit of a buffer, right? So that's why when you're checking those sold listings, you do get more accurate kind of data on what the card's price is. Now, number two, it's ignoring a card's quality. Quality is everything in modern Pokemon collecting. So this is a big one, right? Because one mistake that I made a lot, especially in early days, is I didn't research cards quality enough because the paradigm shifted, right? Collecting back in the day, it was more about just owning the card, right? What's happened now is, especially from around 2021 to 2022, there was a major shift. And the shift that happened was people cared far more about the quality of cards rather than just if it was a rare card. So when you are purchasing cards, you need to learn the quality of the card. So obviously NM and M is mint, and then you've got other ones like LP, which is light played, MP is moderately played, then you got heavy played, damaged, and the like. If you're buying older cards, this is crucial to understand, but also then you need to research the eBay seller to make sure they are accurately listing their card's quality, because it's easy to take nice photos of a card and use clever angles to avoid damage. Though if a seller has a store that's very reputable, it's very unlikely that they're going to try and oversell you on a card. They would rather be transparent to protect the integrity of their store. And that's why buying from places with good feedback matters. But not only that, right? When you're dealing with like Pokemon cards at the moment, PSA 10 copies usually get a premium because, like I said, the psychology of the collector has changed. Right now, PSA 9 copies sometimes sell for less than raw copies because sometimes on a photo, someone can be looking at a raw copy of a card and you know what? Wow, the centering looks great, the corners look amazing, and you know what? That looks like it's PSA 10 worthy. So a lot of people will actually take the gamble and buy a raw copy of a card because they think there's a chance of a PSA 10 over a PSA 9. And that's why quality is very important when you're purchasing in this hobby. Don't fall for the trap of just wanting to own the card. What I think is much better, especially for modern Pokemon collecting, if you're buying modern cards, right, you definitely want to buy the highest quality version of that card. Because even if you cannot send that card to get graded for today, right, which is very common, grading is expensive. If one day you can send that card to grade in the future, you've essentially future-proofed your purchase. Because if you're buying something like a Bubble Mew, right, just ensure that you buy the best quality. That's why when buying Pokemon cards, understanding quality is actually one of the most important aspects of the hobby. Don't fall in the mistake of buying light played cards thinking that they're all going to rise as well. And it is true, if a card rises as a near mint, the light played may rise as well. When you buy light played or moderately played for new cards, you take away a huge chunk of your buyer market. Because don't forget with collectibles, right? It's not just about buying or selling the cards. It's also about how many buyers are available in the market. Now, if you put a light played card as an auction on eBay, you've effectively taken a fraction of the buyer market that's available. That's why I always focus very heavily on the quality of the Pokemon cards you are purchasing, because it does matter for the future buyer market. You want to have the biggest buyer market available when you are selling or buying Pokemon cards, and that's why quality is incredibly important. Also, I just want to say, if you have been enjoying the video so far, feel free to subscribe to the channel. My name's Phil, and I cover a lot of topics relating to the Pokemon TCG and investing in collectibles. Feel free to subscribe for future content. I'd love to have you on board. Now, mistake number 3 is using buy now and pay later services to buy Pokemon cards. Now, I was speaking earlier in the video about the biggest mistakes I made and I learned from. Well, this one is it. Do not use buy now and pay later services to purchase them. Dude, I get it, right? Because every time you're looking at Pokemon cards, sometimes if you're in a bull run, which we were just in, you'll see some cards going up in value. And every day that you don't purchase the card is another day that the card climbed up in value. And it can get a little bit deflating because you're thinking, wow, I don't have the liquid funds right now, but maybe if I just use my buy now, pay later services and buy that, there we go, I can just pay it off later. Now, I know that these services have made our lives easier, but when you're looking at Pokemon cards and you're trying to purchase them, do not touch these services. Trust me, man, I've already gotten myself in so much problems with these services because I was buying all this. But what really gets problematic is if you're using that to buy and open packs, because now you're not even getting something that you can keep in your collection. You are kind of just opening it to purchase packs. That's why I say, if you're going to be doing this stuff, build up, save up a little bit and try avoid that, because in psychology, there's something known as the Diderot effect. Now, what the Diderot effect is, right? It came from the French philosopher Denis Diderot. And to explain it very simply, it's when you purchase something and then when you're looking at the one thing you've purchased, you kind of go into a spiral of consumption because something that you've purchased needs something to match it. A very simple way to explain this is if you buy a PS5, and then you put your PS5 in your lounge room and then you go, wow, you know what? My PS5 is great, but you know what? I could use a better TV. So what do? You match the purchase and you buy a new TV. You know what? I could use maybe a few beanbags in this area as well when we play video games. So you go buy the beanbags, so on and so forth. And with Pokemon cards, this happens a lot. Oh, you know what? I got a Lost Origin booster box, but maybe having one Lost Origin booster box isn't enough, because what if I want to open it one day? Maybe I should get a Lost Origin booster box to keep sealed as well. So I buy the Lost Origin sealed booster box. Then it's like, wow, you know what? How can I have 2 Lost Origin booster boxes without having Fusion Strike as well? So you go buy Fusion Strike. Then you say, wow, I've got now the booster boxes, but I don't have any of the chase cards. Maybe I'll go buy a Gengar VMAX chase card as well, so on and so forth. And you don't want to get caught in this spiral of consumption, because Pokemon cards are wild, man. There's so many people that collect Pokemon cards. So many people love buying them, collecting them, ripping them, opening them. It's a social thing as well. People really enjoy it, right? At the same time, you need to kind of be careful to make sure that you're buying everything in your means. Like for example, right now, this year I'm saving for a wedding. Now, as I'm saving for my wedding, I'm not really buying as many Pokemon cards as I usually would, because previously I'd be like, oh yeah, I don't have any goals, but because I have a different goal in life right now, I don't want to over leverage myself on Pokemon cards. So depending on your life goals as well, you just need to make sure that when you buy these Pokemon cards, first, make sure you have the funds available. Second, don't use buy now, pay later services. So that's why it's always good to take a long and pragmatic approach when purchasing Pokemon cards. Now, also, if you've made some of these mistakes, right, don't stress, because it is very common. Though, if you do have some questions relating to the Pokemon hobby, feel free to ask them in my channel's Discord server. We've just surpassed 8,000 members, and it's becoming an incredible space to connect with the Pokemon community. You'll also be first in line for Discord exclusive giveaways. The server invite is in the video's description. Now, mistake number 4 is not researching your grading companies enough. Grading matters with collectibles, though you also need to research who you're grading with. Super common mistake, especially for newcomers. So they'll pull a very expensive chase card and they go, oh, I'm gonna get this one graded. But then they look at grading costs and they look at PSA and they go, ooh, maybe if I go to a less reputable company or a cheaper company, I can still get my card graded, and hey, it's still gonna come back, and people choose the kind of cheaper services. Now, grading is not one of those things that you wanna cheap out on, because who you grade with matters a lot for buyer markets, right? For example, if you're grading with PSA, at the moment, PSA has the biggest buyer market available, meaning the most people that collect Pokemon cards, and if you want a person to purchase them, if you get that in a PSA 10 version, you have the largest buyer market available. That's very important to understand. Same thing with BGS. BGS has a huge buyer market, and so does CGC. And of course, we've got new grading companies coming out as well. But you also need to research your markets. For example, with Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball actually has a huge BGS audience. So if you're purchasing Dragon Ball collectibles, you need to research, is it better for PSA or BGS? For Dragon Ball, both PSA and BGS are great, because BGS has a huge market share as well for Dragon Ball collectibles. Reason being is because they have a very high chance of already being a PSA 10, so a lot of people try to get black labels when they send them in. But with Pokemon as well, BGS has a good audience if it's a BGS 10 or a black label, but it doesn't have such a large audience for BGS 9 and below. So understanding what the market likes. You have to always make sure, if you're gonna try cut costs in different ways in collectibles. Do not cheap out on grading. Grading is very, very important with trading cards. Why? We're dealing with cardboard, okay? Now, Pokemon does have a big player base, but at the same time, Pokemon is one of those unique TCGs where it has far more collectors than it does players. A lot of TCGs are not like that. And a lot of people say, who do you grade with? I think it's very important that you do your own research and find out who you like to grade with. At this stage, I would say right now, grading with the big 3 is always the best option, which is PSA, BGS, or CGC. And of course, don't forget, when you do grade, you also do get a source of truth between buyers and sellers, which is awesome as well. Now, mistake number 5 is focusing on the size of your collection rather than the quality. Very common thing for newcomers, right? What they do is they buy smaller price cards and they start filling up binders and binders full of these cards. Now, that is great for collecting, but if you do want to sell these cards later down the line, it can become pretty cumbersome selling a lot of cards. What I have learned over the journey, and I think a lot of people who watch this channel or a lot of experienced collectors and investors have kind of learned, is that if you do like purchasing Pokemon cards, the quality of your collectibles matters a lot because of the buyer market that's available. It also is easier to sell a few cards that are very high priced rather than selling a lot of these smaller collectibles. Now, one mistake I did very early on is I would be buying so many cards, man. I was buying binders and binders worth of cards. Now, did my collection look awesome? It did, but also then I got kind of annoyed as well because I had so many of these collectibles, but I didn't have anything that I was like, wow, I've got like a grail piece, or I've got something that I'm so happy with. I had a lot of smaller collectibles, but none of those real big ticket items. Then I kind of shifted and I kind of said, hey, you know what? Instead of having all these kind of binders full of cards, it's actually cooler if I have one of the top chase cards. Number one, they're very rare. Number two, they kind of work like a little collectible trophy. Number 3, they are easier to sell later down the line because you have the most people who kind of experience them in a generation. When you buy Pokemon cards, right, it's really cool to own them and you can have a binder. But with how many illustration rares and trainer gallery cards, it's not that expensive to get a binder that looks awesome. But if you do want to purchase something in the hopes that it will rise in value over time, that's when it becomes an awesome decision to look at Grail Pokemon cards or, Pokemon cards that are high in demand. Though, as much as we are growing in this hobby, one of the big things to remember is collecting on a budget. And a very common question is, how do I build a Pokemon collection on a budget? Well, I reveal the answer to that right here. Within this video on screen, I go over how to effectively build a Pokemon collection while on a budget. If you enjoyed this video, then click the video that's appearing on screen and you can learn more about it there. I'll see you on the next video.